Nina, could you hear us what we were saying about doing some assignments and stuff? One of the things that Elise and I, before, in case Dee gets on there, she had asked Dee for some clarification on what Dee was saying at the end of the meeting last time about representation of the people of color on boards. And Elise was a little confused with what Dee was trying to say. And so through some clarification, let me just state that what Dee was saying is that the Black population within the city limits of Asheville is reducing, is diminishing. And presumably they're moving out to the county, but the county rate hasn't grown all that much either. So when we say we were talking about this opportunity that the city has to go outside the city limits to ask people to serve on city boards, well, if you open that up, quote, indiscriminately, what Dee is saying is that you are making it even harder for people of color to get represented on those city boards. And because of the greater population of Buncombe County and it being also predominantly white, it does make a problem. And so we got from Maggie a understanding that it's up to city council to determine if a commission can go outside the city limits to ask for membership. And there's basically two ways that it's done. One, it's because the commission, board, or committee is set up to be representative of both the city and the county, like multimodal transportation, I think, or something like that, where it's just obvious that we need the county input to make this an appropriate type of working committee. The other is they can do it if they are having a hard time getting folks who, city residents who are not participating. And they can put caveats on it, is that you've got to either work within the city limits, own a property within the city limits or something, but it can also be just wide open. And it's just up to council. So I think that we will get pushback from Dee if we, it was a recommendation toward the end of the report that Elise was trying to say maybe we should open it up a little bit more, but we probably should discuss that as a group as to how we'd like to do that or how we would want to address it. But I would prefer to wait until Elise is in on the conversation. But that's the background to what Elise and I discussed after she had some emails with Dee that were a little hard to understand. So that where are we down to?
Yeah, I shared this recommendation. Just the context here is whether we should or shouldn't include a recommendation that expands eligibility for boards to county residents as well. And it might be something that we need to discuss more. We might have to take a vote to decide whether to include it or not. I can see both perspectives. Right. As to whether that makes sense.
You know, I can too, but knowing, we talked about this early on in this process about if our population, I think we were using the number 12 or 15%, which I believe it's less than that now. But if you look at a board of 12 people and you're trying to get a person of color, and really ideally you always want to get more than just one person of color, I mean, that is more than 15% represented on the council, on the committee, which I have no problem with. I'm just saying that it is hard when you start splicing these numbers down and the small pool of people of color that you have to work with. that, and not always getting the same people all the time, trying to get some new voices onto these committees. It is hard, but it is something that I think that personally, I think that we should always be striving for constantly. And there's different ways you have to reach out. You can't put just a cattle call out there and expect people of color to feel as though they're going to be welcome and accepted and included. And so therefore you've got to go do a one-on-one ask, so to speak, for to do that, and to say, we want you because you have these experiences, you have this kind of knowledge, you will be vital to this work, the work that we want to do, and we want your voice. And I'm not sure that that's the role of staff, that they have the time or the inclination to do that, that's probably going to be the role of the chairperson or other committee members to do that type of one-on-one recruitment once some folks are identified that they want to recruit for that position. So, we want to just keep that in the background as we're moving forward and remember to talk about that. Let's see. So I did that. Yay. And Maggie had just actually, there was something in the SOG documents, the city, municipal, and county government book that's it's basically that it's up to the cities for that. It's also true that it's, just as an aside, that we were researching for something else, that some cities, the mayors get to vote, and other cities, they can only vote on a tie. I thought that was just standard across the state, but it's not. So it depends on which municipality you live in as to whether mayors vote all the time or only for ties. So that's just a little nugget for y'all to think about. Okay, so
Stacy, before we move on, I just wanted to say Nina has her hand raised.
God, I'm so sorry. Please go.
So, I feel a little awkward as we're currently an all-white group sitting here talking about this issue of recruitment of people of color. But I think the notion that chairs of boards are going to be going out and recruiting people in communities of color based on who they know or who has a profile. I mean, I think that the work of keeping the public aware of opportunities to participate in boards needs to be consistent and ongoing all the time. And whether it's done through neighborhood association meetings or through some kind of city channel in social media or whatever, I think that finding a way, I think the principle of finding the broader community where they are in order to develop interest in participation and make people aware of the availability of accommodations and assistance so that they can participate without it being tremendously burdensome. I think that's where we need to be, personally, I feel that's where we should be focusing our recommendations. If the goal is to achieve some kind of proportional representation, which my understanding from the latest census is more like 10%, mm-hmm. Having one or two people, I think the more the better, frankly. But the only way I think to have a pipeline of participants is to make the civic discussion a much more deliberate and ongoing process than just, an announcement at city council meetings and, a post somewhere on the city website. That's just not going to cut it. in my opinion.
Alan and then Ted.
Yeah, I responded to this issue a number of months ago and actually listed a number of ways the city could do outreach um, using vehicles like Urban News, reaching out to the Black churches, AME churches in town, and the pastors, and through the neighborhood association. I don't think the city makes enough of an effort to achieve getting a significant amount of Black representation on city boards and commissions. And I put the onus on the city. I don't put the onus, the way they advertise on the city website, and they expect everybody. Well, some people don't have access to computers or have to go to the libraries to use them and don't have internet at home or can't afford internet at home. But they would like to participate, I believe, if given an opportunity. I know when we were on the neighborhood advisory committee, no, I was on, I'm sorry. We had several Black members, including a pastor of one of the churches in town. So I think the city needs to make more of an effort and use a variety of tools, and some of them may be non-traditional, but they need to think out of the box. And they could achieve that if they did. That's all I had to say.
Ted.
Yeah, I just want to, I agree with what's been said, and want to, my comment was going to be what Alan wound up on, that the onus is on the city. The city has the resources. The boards don't have the resources to do that kind of outreach. And so, yeah. Do we have something in the document that talks about that kind of outreach? Maybe we should add it if we don't. I'm not remembering it, but
We do, and I'd have to do a search of the document.
Well, it's right here on this page, at least some of it,
I'm not
about having informational meetings and sessions and community forums and so forth. I think number 3, the under recruitment and outreach here, the third recommendation.
Right. All of our recommendations about recruitment and outreach would be listed here. So if we wanted to add anything in addition to these items, we certainly could. But this, as far as I recall, this is the part of the document where those items live.
No, there's something else.
Can I make one other point? If you
Go right ahead, Alan.
you know, having 3 members, half of a city council being African American women, you would think that they themselves would be able to help get the word out on the need for a more balanced representation on the boards. And again, it's with the city. And I put the blame on council, on the city staff, because I don't think they're doing their work. And again, just by posting an opening on a city website, they're going to expect to get responses. Well, good luck at that.
Right. I agree with you on that. Well, then maybe Patrick, go down and let me see if it's one of these stragglers. No. we'll table that and see. But I do think that maybe what we see maybe we can say that the recommendation should be that to not just post in the paper of record, but to broaden their reach and recruitment and stuff. Jack, Patrick.
Well, yeah, I'll say quickly, it's already been pointed out that this third, under recruitment and outreach, the recommendation KK,
Mm-hmm.
I remember I authored that, and the intent is what we've been talking about, is for the city to get behind more active outreach, in the community centers, faith communities. It's been mentioned too that, through the, the urban news,
Right.
to just be much more active in going out and just explaining what the boards and commissions are all about and why the city is asking for community involvement, and to have the mayor and or board members or other people that have a bit of an image out there to partake in these sessions, to just go out and tell people, we want you involved. It doesn't have to necessarily be recruiting to a specific board or specific openings, but at least go out there and say, all of these boards and commissions exist. We want your involvement. We'll maybe even just putting up postings in the community centers and on church bulletin boards when the openings exist would help too.
That's a good point. Patrick.
Yeah, and I would add that I do think it's important that we're explicit, not just like do a better job recruiting, but saying how. And I do think item KK does describe that in a very real sense. Actually doing recruiting sessions isn't something I've seen any board do, but this seems like a good recommendation. And I just wanted to add that I think one of the best ways to get people interested in volunteering their time to serve is to ensure that it's worthwhile. And I think everything from the top of this document on down is designed to address that piece of it. So I just wanted to center that part of why people might not be selling service on boards and why people might not be signing up is partly because of the problem we're here to solve, to make the system worth people's time.
There was another hand raised. Ted? And
Yeah.
please note Jay's comment in the about that he sees openings are at that Mountain Express, Asheville Today, Nextdoor, Asheville.com, and BPR, which those are probably all wide outlets, kind of thing. So Ted, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add that the French Broad River Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the Land to Sky, has done a lot of work in trying to do outreach to marginalized groups, to get more public input into the transportation planning process. And so I don't know if we include it in the report, or maybe just pass it on to the clerk's office that's a model, that they may look at and get some ideas about realistic ways of how to go about that.
Patrick, can you just put a note on that? And actually, I finally see this. I was paying attention. Look at recommendation JJ above recruitment and outreach. And the city of Asheville should allow individuals who reside in Buncombe County, but outside the city of Asheville, be eligible for membership on advisory boards, blah, blah, blah. This is where was what Dee was so concerned about. And not in favor of, actually. So, and saying, you know, people who have a significant stakeholder within the city limits, such as they work or here and that sort of thing. Because needless to say, our in-migration on a daily basis is very high. So this is the one, this recommendation, JJ, is the one that Dee and Elise were talking.
Stacy,
Yes.
Nina just posted some of the ideas, and I referred to also in my comments. And I think we need to add those as bullet points, perhaps, as examples, so the city knows that we've been thinking, not in general terms, but very specific ideas that they should consider going forward, and broadening their efforts to, and ways they can better reach the diverse communities in town, not only African American, but Latino also.
Good point.
Let me ask this. Do we all feel that these are what recommendation LL is trying to achieve, and it's just not saying that? It kind of seems that I'm not entirely clear what LL is, you know, an action plan. Is that about recruitment? I'm wondering if we need to add a new recommendation to capture this, or if, you know, if this one LL could be expanded to include those specifics.
I think we need to be more specific. I do. I agree with you. If that's what you're pointing at or raising, I think we ought to be actually give them examples of what we're talking about with recruitment in the future.
I'm not really, Alan, you and Patrick may be more familiar with what CAPE is doing. I haven't had much.
I'm not, sorry. I'm not, I really am not with CAPE.
I'll just share that I know you could look at one of the recent board and commission committee meetings when they talk about appointments and recruiting. Staff do provide a list of what they're already doing today. We might want to reference that. It might include some of these outlets, but perhaps we could provide suggestions to expand that list.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks like Elise is not going to make it. So let's see. Let's go back up to the top. I know that Nina ran out of time this last 2 weeks. Did others of y'all get the chance to work on some of the adjustments that we wanted to make? Jack?
Yeah, I'm going to, Nina was kind enough to apologize in advance. I'm doing it in the meeting, but I have not been able to address the board review. I was going to recast that more as a data-based or data-driven process. I began doing some research, but I've not yet addressed the document itself.
Okay. No judgment, no problem. I understand that, as we'd said earlier, this is volunteer and you have other commitments also.
Nina said, reasons but no excuse.
Well, why don't we go ahead and Patrick and I were talking about blocking out this report, and because I think that what we have here, those of you who are skilled in the analytical department are going to be the ones who we will hope put some meat on these bones that we've created that will give folks who are not analytical a narrative on what the data has shown us in a report format. And then some of the others of us can write the introduction and closing, I guess, to the document, and utilizing some of the narrative that we've already got in our report from before. Does that sound good to y'all? Okay.
So, like, for clarification, are we talking about fleshing out the background section in each of these to provide a little more data from the surveys themselves? Is that the idea?
I think that's,
Go ahead, Patrick.
I think that is the ask, and I think we're looking for the authors of the original report to help us, attach references to that report through really every background section where appropriate.
And
Yeah, I
it
think
can
that-
be, it can be just links. It doesn't necessarily have to be newly written narrative, but I think that would be helpful, at least somewhat, that we put it all into this one place where somebody can read it and everything they need to know is right there. But for drilling down, they can go back to the original report. Nina?
Correct me if I'm mistaken, but the first report we did from the main survey, is we already have that, and yes, we could reference it and so forth. I don't, maybe I'm just drawing a blank here, but did we present a report on the staff survey findings, or is that something that's just been rolled
No,
into this?
We haven't done anything on the staff.
Right.
That's what we've got to meld the two together.
Right. So it seems to me that there is some real value in having narrative sentences that are backed up by reference to specific findings, both from the initial survey of board participants and then the staff survey as well, so that we can point to the claims and the explanations for why we're making these recommendations based on that. I think that's really important.
I thought that's what I was saying, but okay. Jack?
Yeah, as far as we did not create a single report from the second survey, but we did in fact have 3 reports. Elise, Ted, and I each drafted a section. We just never put them into a single report. So, I mean, we could, I don't want to create more work for all of us here, is to put those 3 together and somehow write around the 3 components, or just put the 3 components together as 3 sections and leave it at that and reference it that way.
It was you all, the 3 of you worked on something slightly different for all 3 of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been a while since I looked at them.
Yeah, basically it was, Elise looked at the raw data and summarized the raw data. Ted did some more statistical analysis, and I looked at the open-ended questions.
Okay.
Let's hear from Ted and Patrick.
Go ahead, please.
I think Patrick was on first.
Yes, Patrick.
Yeah, just briefly. This is just a suggestion, but one way to approach it would be to flesh out the backgrounds using our original report, the board respondents, to give us strong references, and then just Jack, Ted, or Elise, based on the report you wrote. I believe that the staff surveys generally agreed with what we already had from the original report. So you might just be able to kind of add in where those statements were in agreement without having to create. I would recommend doing that rather than trying to create a separate report product when we're this far along in the recommendations.
Right. I agree with you, because I do think it was astounding how much they were in alignment. I think the only thing where they really diverged was if they thought that the committee was highly functional or dysfunctional. And everything else, which was interesting, with everything else they agreed. So Ted, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Patrick that I think the three documents that Elise and I and Jack worked on, let's reference them as as working documents or something like that, and rather than combine them into a new report.
Okay, so how do you want to do this physically? How are we going to make those three reports into something that the rest of us can work off of? Because they were pretty involved, and I'm not sure that the rest of us who don't have y'all's skills can do that. So Ted, what's your idea?
Yeah, I think just keeping them as background documents, and then as we go ahead and flesh out the background sections of this report, we'll appropriately reference and summarize them. I think that is the way to go, rather than creating anything new. But I think, yeah, we can do that within the report here.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how we can get this background done and then take this other, get a larger 360-degree view of the data in a more executive summary type format, so that one does not have to read all of the recommendations necessarily to get a sense of what the two surveys provided.
Stacey,
Yeah.
I don't know what order it makes sense, but I think we do have a known task here, which is filling out all of the backgrounds to get them tied more closely to the original report. It seems like, I think the question is like Jack, Ted, and Elise, who isn't here, are you all willing to do that work for all these background sections?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, why don't we, I think maybe the best thing to do would be to go through the sections, and then we'll volunteer, or I guess Elise might get volunteered for some of them appropriately, and just split it up.
Okay, do you want to do that? Wait, something just happened with my computer. Do you want to do that assignments wise, or do the three of y'all want to work that out together?
I'm good with working it out, save some time in the meeting.
Jack, how about you?
Yeah, I think that can work fine.
Okay.
We can arrange a call among the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And then perhaps Alan, Patrick, and I can work on the introduction type stuff and pull in what we do know about without getting into the analytical aspect of it, but just the overview stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It'll only be about a page also if it's an executive summary, I would think. It shouldn't be
yeah.
too long.
Yeah.
We're just summarizing what is in the document itself.
Exactly.
In a broad way.
Right. Well,
Not
I'm
a lot
thinking of
line.
I'm thinking of an introduction of how we got to where we are, and then an executive summary of the data. Two kind of different perspectives.
Yeah, the executive summary, I would think, shouldn't be more than a couple of paragraphs,
Right.
couple, 3 paragraphs.
Right. I
Exactly.
agree.
And I think it should focus more on a summary of the recommendations and the direction of the recommendations rather than a summary of the data.
That you're right. You're right. You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then why don't we call it a night? And is it easy to find the original report on the website, Patrick?
Good question.
Was it one of the links that that you sent out prior to this meeting?
Yeah, I was going to
sent-
suggest, if I might, if it's not too much trouble, Patrick, if you could make a shared landing document, kind of table of contents that has links to the most recent version of our working document, plus the prior report, the other working documents and so forth, because I will confess that I cannot keep track of all these things, and I don't know which of 400 emails to look at to find them.
Yes.
So I think it would be wonderful if we could have kind of a directory that would help us keep track of all of these moving parts.
Yes, and that should include this recommendations working doc, our previous presentations to boards and commissions and council, as well as the 3 analyses that Jack, Ted, and Elise made on the staff survey. Is that what everyone needs?
Yeah, and also, I mean, it would be helpful to have links to, if we want to see the raw survey results or whatever, just so that we have everything in one place. And maybe ultimately we want to include some of those things so that people can go and look at the source data themselves if they want to. I mean, in the
They'll
transparency.
definitely be able to have
Right.
that.
So I think just having some kind of central locus for being able to access all that stuff would be tremendously helpful. I know it would be for me.
Yeah, I can do that. I just made myself a note.
Thank you.
And
All right, then.
Stacy, before we go, it would be helpful for me just to go down this and make sure I'm aware of things that are still to-dos for me, and it might be for others.
That's
if
a
you don't
great
mind.
idea. Let's do that. And let's see. If anybody gets any really great inspiration on how to call this one-stop shop scenario for where all of our committee stuff go, other than just calling it the city clerk's office, that would be great. So let's just move through the document, Patrick.
Yeah, so we have introduction here. We've got a background section here.
Mm-hmm.
We have a background here.
Uh-huh.
I'm just scanning the comments on the right
Yeah,
to see
me
where it says
too.
like so-and-so is going to do something like here. This is the first one I see. I have picked up revising this recommendation around IT staff.
So with all the backgrounds that we have for each of these sections, that in itself should serve as the groundwork, the foundation for the executive summary, I would think.
Somewhat,
Yes.
yes. Uh-huh.
So it's taking that, I don't know how many there are right now, 3 or 4,
I think there's a few more than that.
are there more?
Maybe 8.
I'm sorry?
There's maybe 8 sections like
8,
this. I'm
okay.
just guessing. Yeah.
So combining those into a kind of a 3 or 4 paragraph summary of what's in this document. That would be a start, I would think, would it not?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the backgrounds are different from the I mean, background's set up.
Not the same as the recommendation. I'm not saying they are. I'm saying that should serve as the basis for the some executive summary without getting into recommendations.
I guess I'm unclear about what the goal is for the executive summary. Is it to not include recommendations? I'm confused. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something.
You know, Alan, I was thinking that the introduction would include what we've got in some of these background paragraphs under the categories, and that the executive summary really would focus on the recommendations, what we thought were the top 3, or what we think are the 5 most important, that, or the ones that are going to take some real cultural shifts of our staff and our community, or any of those kinds of things that are the bigger issues. But again, consensus of the group on that. And maybe when we get into a little bit more of this, we'll be able to have a better sense of that.
The editorial person, pardon me, the editorial person in me always asks the question, who is the primary intended audience for any specific document that's being produced? And what is it that they need to know in order to see the virtue of whatever we're recommending is? So we may need a couple of different versions of this. One for presentation in a public forum like City Council, one that is more detailed and technical and chock full of references, and then one that is somewhere in the middle. But I would hope that we would be able to have something like a 3 or 4 paragraph one-pager that briefly states why we did what we did, what we learned from it, and what we're recommending that would be suitable for general consumption. Is that what you would consider the executive summary to be?
If you're going to have all of those components, it's going to be more than 1 page. I would think that our primary audience is City Council and the city staff and the city clerk staff and staff, more the management level staff that are going to have to make these adjustments in their departments. Because they're the ones who are going to make the changes. They're the ones who are having a different, whose job responsibilities will change somewhat.
Well, as a public advocate, I would say that a very important audience for this is the general public, or at least the public of people who actively pay attention to civic matters, and making sure that we have a easy to understand, clear, positively focused, constructive document that they can come to a city council meeting in support of is really a good idea. Because if we want council to act, they have to be highly motivated to do this, because it's going to be a big pain in the neck. It's going to cost money, and it's going to be tricky to staff up, and these are not minor tweaks we're asking for. And I think
I would say that I don't think it's going to be that costly, except for maybe some technical stuff, but they're already putting their money in that. You've got one department that's already implementing a lot of these recommendations. So I don't know that it's all that onerous, actually, seeing that Stephanie is putting forth a lot of effort to get this so that her committees do work more effectively. Ted?
Yeah, what was I going to say now? Yeah, I think there's not a lot of financial cost, but there's a lot of organizational cost in what we're asking. There was something else that I was going to say, and your comments made it just fly out of my mind.
I'm so sorry, Ted. I'm sorry.
No, it was remind me what Nina was saying.
We've got to get
Oh,
the general public.
I remember now. Yeah, having in my in my former life prepared a lot of memos, etc., for city council and economic development board consumption, and these are basically ordinary folks. I think I don't see a contradiction in the level of clarity and simplicity that needs to be in this document for city council and staff as an audience and the general public as an audience. They both need crisp, clear, almost bullet like communication.
Good point. Does that make sense to you, Nina?
Well, yes. I mean, I think all communication should be clean and crisp and clear and easily understood. But I think there's a difference between a 20-page document that's intended to, or a 30-page document that's intended to lay things out in great detail with lots of supporting data and information, and a backgrounder document or a summary document that can be sent to people in the press, that can be circulated at neighborhood meetings and so forth, that explains the who, what, where, and why in a more condensed fashion, and then allows people, if they're so motivated, to go and look at the more complex document. And I think that those are two very different communication tasks. I don't think they're equivalent. It's actually much harder to do the shorter one than the longer one, because it requires providing the minimum to be persuasive, while not leaving out anything that's really essential. But I do think that this will not be a dawdle for city staff, and I think it will cost both staff time and perhaps require some new hire to fully flesh out all of these asks that we're making. If you feel, I mean, one of the things we heard from the city staff survey was that people felt overextended and not always well supported in their tasks as things already stand. And so there will be pain in this transition for folks. And I think if we want to sell it, we need to make clear that the benefits and the costs outweigh the pain that is going to be associated with it.
Ted, your comments, please.
Yeah. What I hear Nina saying is a document somewhere in between an executive summary and the full report that's a standalone from the report. I think I do see the usefulness of that. But I think that's something that gets put together after this report is done and put to bed, and then we go back and sort of extract and compress and redo for that public consumption bit.
Mm-hmm. Right. I agree that I don't think that we can do shortened version of it or a condensed version of it without having the full document, then you can reduce it down to some good nuggets. I agree with that. I do want to remind you all, in keeping with this, is that a lot of this is going back instead of across the departments. That once you get once you get this stuff rolling and you get the notebooks set up for the different committees, because you've got one section that's going to be for everybody, one section that's going to be specific, that sort of thing. Then a lot of the onus is hopefully going to be off of city staff. And keeping and in line with that, remember that when Sarah left the city clerk's office, they hired 2 people for her place. They now have an assistant city clerk and a deputy city clerk. And I think that's in preparation for some of the work that we're putting forth here. So, they know that they can't, that this was coming. And I think that they are planning for that. And I think that once we get this moving and the wheels start moving more smoothly, that hopefully it will be the end result is that there is less work for departmental staff than what has been going on from the logistics and all of that sort of thing. So hopefully that will be the final result. So are we clear on what our next steps are? And what our 2 specialized groups are going to work on over the next few weeks?
I think there might be some tasks that are still open here. If we can just jump through these quickly. I'll just say on board review, this is one that Jack is picking up, revising the board review piece, and then also I believe, yes, this recommendation Jack has picked up. Here's one that requires additional discussion, but we'll skip this for now.
Okay.
This background, just Elise noted this one. This one needs to reference findings from the staff survey. So this one might be one that Ted, Jack, and Elise need to flesh out a little bit more. That's under communications. I will note on this one, there's a recommendation. This is under communications as well. We found this item unclear, and I did propose 2 alternate options here. So I could settle on one of these, or if someone else wants to review these 2 options and create final language for this recommendation, that's open. This was around scheduling updates for council or council committees. We have kind of 4 statements here, but we need to make it a paragraph. So I gave 2 options.
Okay.
Elise did draft background, or no, Jack drafted background for this one. Elise and Jack drafted parts of this.
Okay.
So we've got content for that one. I know there's one where we still need a background drafted.
I know. Where is that one?
That's recruitment and outreach. We need someone to write a background statement here. So I'm going to ask, is there anyone on tonight's call that would like to draft the background paragraph here?
Okay. I tell you what, let's get some of this other work done, and I'll see what I can do on some of that, and we'll just see where we are in the next weeks.
Jack and Elise and I can work that out, and one of us will draft it.
I would suggest that is the eligibility issue part of the recruitment and outreach section? Is that
yes,
that part of it?
Should we vote on that on JJ?
I really would like to have would really like to have Elise and Dee
Okay.
both in on that conversation, since Elise is recommending it and Dee is against it. And Dee is our only person of color, and she feels that it'll impact that part of the population greatest. So let's
I
wait
think
to have them part of that.
there's two or three, maybe two other items that require additional discussion that we may need to vote on. We should probably just like plan either next meeting or the one following that to, just come to consensus how we want to move those three forward. But I think there's quite a bit of stuff we need to write in the meantime. So,
Okay.
Stacy,
What is the section of this?
oh,
Alan,
for clarification, are we going to try then to take all the backgrounds, of which, there are a number of them there, and combine them into one introduction then? Bring
yes and no.
bring those ideas into a
Uh,
I mean,
I think that
we need to have some kind of introduction here, and the background seem to provide some of the basis for that.
when I
Sure.
say introduction, I go look at our original report that we did just for the member survey,
Yes.
and it doesn't need to be much more. We just need to adjust it to show that we've done 2 surveys and how that, and add in that aspect of how that came into being. We don't, and that's what I'm calling the introduction and the background per se of why this ever even got started. I don't know that we need to restate the backgrounds on each of the segments, each of the categories in the report, other than when we're addressing each of the recommendations under those categories.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Jay, did you have a question?
Are the recommendations listed under this recruitment and outreach meant to be related to recruitment and outreach?
Yes.
And
They're
he's
supposed to.
obviously he's not so sure about that. Well, Jay, I will say that that these are addressing some of the barriers that people say are the reason why they don't participate, or that they have discontinued participation.
And what's the heading above this?
That's expanding eligibility, and it could be diversity of representation.
The broad heading of what though?
Yeah,
These
diversity
are all
and
under
representation.
diversity and exactly.
Oh, I'm zoomed in, so I couldn't see it. Sorry. Okay, diversity and representation. Okay.
And I will say that Stephanie's meeting the other day was at 10 or 11 o'clock on a work day. And again, that is, and through from 10 to 2. And that, I thought, was an interesting time frame. It was great if you're city staff, because you could run into the office, check any major emails, and then go back to the office and deal with some, whatever fires occurred. But for people the volunteers, that's about the worst possible time from my perspective that you could ask someone to come and give up part of their day. And if you're not in a situation where you have control over your time, then you couldn't have participated, or you would have had to have, I'm sorry, I got my nose itchy, that you'd have to ask permission. It might be that you don't get paid. It could be that, you have to make up that time in another way that's not so helpful. So, these are all things that we've got to try to figure out how we can make it work for the largest number of members of our community.
Yeah. I think the recommendations that are listed under recruiting and outreach are really about accessibility. Some of these
Right.
locations scheduling times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah,
Or
and
maybe-
it's hard to
maybe the
recruit
background.
people if they can't come.
It is about accessibility, but Jay, in all honesty, accessibility has been the boondoggle of getting people to participate. So, and at least as far as I've seen and looking at some meetings, you get the highest amount of public input on the evening meetings. But then I know what staff does not want to do is have 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings a month after the regular workday. But that's probably the best time for volunteers, or at least at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. So that's going to be a hard thing to reconcile.
I do, one way of like, I get what Jay is saying, that these aren't, you could argue that these are diversity type, recruitment type efforts, but these could also go with our hybrid meeting recommendations, which are generally under technology. Like, it's almost, we could structure this so there was a accessibility section that could list some of these items along with hybrid meetings. That would be a different way to structure it.
Let me suggest that perhaps we could think about this in terms of representation and participation. So we want the broadest amount of representation of our community that as we can get, and they want everyone to be able to participate. So, recruitment sounds, I don't know, I've never loved that phrase, but representation and participation are really the key challenges here. Getting people from all walks of life and all backgrounds and all experiences and all levels of expertise, and making sure that they're able to participate. So that's how I would recast this section if I were to doing.
I like that because it felt like we were conflating like recruitment of board and commission members with participation of the public at large. But if we're combining them, I like that framing.
Oh, I think that they're related.
Yeah.
But that they are separate issues. Accessibility of the public in order to observe and learn and understand is somewhat separate from the ability to participate as a board member or to be to have a representation as a board member. So
can I ask, just in that line of thought, do we think like right now we have a section called technology that the recommendations are really about supporting hybrid meetings? Do we feel that the idea of accessibility or participation should join these recommendations about hybrid meetings with some of the ones listed here around meeting locations and things like that? Or are they different?
Ted, or you want to comment?
Yeah, I think they're different. I really like Nina's recasting of the headline here. Participation and whatever the other one was. Representation, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I think these things fall, much better fall under that.
Well, Nina, why don't, because you're very articulate on this, why don't you either write that up in the comments section so Patrick can drop it into the document so the other folks can see it, or go into the document later tonight and put a comment on the document.
Or I can make a note.
Okay, or you could just change the header to representation and participation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, but I think some of the background that you're talking about is important. And you had some good phraseology in there that would be good to pick up on.
I'm happy to just capture it now. But can you tell me, is it this heading we're talking about changing?
Yes.
And can you restate your suggested edit?
Representation and participation.
Participation
It would just be representation.
and
And
Mhm.
And that way it's about both the compensate, both the makeup of the boards.
Yeah.
And how we get to an appropriate level of representation by recruitment or by whatever means, how we get to high quality representation, and then how we enable and facilitate participation. And you know, a lot of that has to do with whether we can provide compensation, whether we can provide childcare, whether we can schedule things at hours that are appropriate for working folks, etc.
okay, seems like we have consensus on that.
Yay.
Still
And
stuck
then-
on that next heading though.
Yeah, Jay had
Where
further.
we're talking about recruitment, but none of these recommendations. When I hear recruitment, I think about like the things that Alan was talking about earlier, and there's none of that here.
I will note I did comment on this item that we should maybe expand this one to include
Okay.
those items or add an item.
KK has recommendations about having council members out in the community talking up board participation, and yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
Mhm.
But yes, that whole laundry list of media outlets and so forth that we documented earlier.
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at all the city staff and all the groups that they're involved with across the community, and they're beyond the city, they do participate in organizations. And I think that's another vehicle. I mean, that just by personal contact of all the city staff members who are aware and involved in recruitment, at least those associated with the boards, I think
Mhm.
should have that.
Frankly, I think every public meeting should have an announcements section at the beginning or the end that says,
We're looking for membership.
we're looking for board members for this, this, and this. If you want to learn more, talk to so-and-so in the room here.
And you can achieve that too, better achieve it by use of hybrid meetings.
Mhm.
They're more into the public arena.
True. Okay, everybody clear on what we want to do next? And what about when we want to meet?
Yep, and I was gonna share I guess the bad news first. 2 weeks from today is Labor Day, so
I just
would
noticed
assume,
that.
I assume we're not meeting then. But we could, so like two easy options would be, you know, the following week, September 9th at 5:30, or we could look at a different day, the week of September 2nd.
Let's see. Actually, I have a pretty full week that week.
What we could plan to do is meet the following week on the 9th at our regular time. Our regular meeting would be the following meeting, and we should plan to maybe meet back to back if we need to try to get things ready for October.
Mhm. Okay, what about September 9th, y'all?
Should be looking at two meetings in September, like the 9th and the 23rd.
Thinking it would probably be the 9th and either the 16th or the 23rd. The 16th would be our regular time.
Yeah, I know, but
We could
that's
just
back to back. We well, I'm thinking
Either way, like we don't have to decide on the second piece, but yes, I do think we'll meet twice in September.
okay.
Okay.
Does anyone have a conflict on the 9th? Does that work for everyone?
Works for me.
All right.
Can't do the 9th, but please meet without me.
Okay.
Okay. All right, guys. Get busy writing and have a fun Labor Day weekend. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thank you,
y'all.
everyone.